Hi everyone, today we are building a bathroom vanity, experimenting with new hardware, and learning lessons the hard way. So this project started earlier this year around September when my girlfriend's mom decided to remodel her bathroom. And as part of this remodel, she really wanted a solid walnut vanity. But after looking online for a while, she could not find something that would both fit her needs and not cost $5,000 to $6,000. So she came to me with the idea and what design she would like for a bathroom vanity and asked if I would be willing to build her one. And even though some of the design elements were not fully figured out yet, and that seemed to me like a pretty intimidating project, I also really like building furniture and pleasing people, so I said yes. After buying all the lumber I needed at Gobi Walnut near Portland, Oregon, I got back to my shop and got to work. But what you've seen me do so far is cut everything to rough thickness and width, and then leave the lumber to rest for a few days. After that, it's time to cut everything to its final size. This dedicated ripping blade makes quick work of cutting through this almost 2-inch thick walnut. Now, of course, no cut is perfect, so I like to come back with a cabinet scraper and smooth everything, which will save me a lot of time sanding. When looking at bathroom vanities design, I found that there's typically two styles. You could do either a cabinet vanity or something that looked more like a piece of furniture. I opted for kind of a mix of both, using a solid wood frame with some side panels made out of walnut plywood. My reasoning was that plywood was way more stable, especially in an environment with a lot of changes in humidity like a bathroom. After cutting everything to size, it was time to work on my joinery. Since the joinery on this project is hidden and will not be a very impactful design choice, I decided to go with dominoes. And if you don't have a domino for this project, you could do the same thing with pocket holes or even dowels. Using any of those joinery methods for me makes design way easier because I don't need to account for the lost material in a mortise and tenon, for example. All I need to do is mark the locations of my joints and then use the domino to drill all the mortises. Using a domino can seem like a pretty foolproof method of doing joinery. And for the most part it is. Well, that is, unless you're as big of a fool as I am. For example, what if you drilled all your mortises to too shallow of a depth? I mean, I would never do that obviously, but just hypothetically here. Or, not that anyone would do that, but what if you decided to assemble your whole piece of furniture and then flipped it on its edge with just dominoes installed? Yeah, I know. But anyways, once everything looked good to me, I was ready to do the dreaded glue up. I'll typically start by gluing in the tenons and then letting them dry for a little bit before coming back and assembling the whole piece together. I also like to break up everything in sub-assemblies to make things easier on myself. For example here, I'm going to glue up the sides together before assembling the whole vanity together. Speaking of ways to make things easier on yourself, did you know that you can subscribe to my channel for free and see all of my past and future content that way? Just saying, think about it. Now, as I mentioned before, the sides of the vanity and the drawer fronts were going to be made out of walnut plywood. So after pulling this sheet halfway into my kitchen and back into my shop, it was time to flip it and cut it to size. After selecting what grain would look better for my drawer fronts and my sides, I got to cutting, labeling every part as I went. Grain direction is a very important part of building furniture, and that can kind of make or break your piece. For this side of the vanity, I decided to create a rabbet that would accommodate for the plywood panel. Now, there's a lot of other ways I could have done that, for example using pocket holes or even dominoes and assembling it all together. However, I had been looking for an excuse to buy this rabbeting bit from Bits and Bits for a very long time, so that's what I did. I mean, if it's a design need, you just can't work around it. I had never used a bit like that before, and I was really surprised at how smooth of a cut it made. After a few passes, I had a rabbet for the 3/4 inch panel done. All I had to do was square off those round corners left by the rabbeting bit. Just like that, a very nice fit. I also made sure to pre-finish the panel before gluing it in place, as it would be way harder to do later on. At this point in the build, I had both my sides and my aprons ready for glue up, so I decided to go ahead. I also wanted to add some brace pieces that would help support the weight of the countertop that would be on top of the vanity. Now, I learned a lot during this glue up. The first thing I learned is that doing sub-assemblies is indeed much easier. The second thing I learned is that 4 feet is probably as large of a piece of furniture as I'll be able to build on my current assembly table. The third thing I learned is that pipe clamps are your friends. And the last thing I learned is that you should definitely double check the measurements for your sink before adding your brace pieces. But as it is often the case in woodworking, most mistakes are fixable, and for here it was just a case of cutting those braces and installing them at different spots. It was then finally time to build my drawers, and if you've seen vanity drawers, they look a little bit weird because they have to have a notch in the middle to accommodate for the pipes. I also waited until I had my box built so I could take measurements off of it and be way more precise with my drawers. That was probably the most intimidating part of the build for me because I had never built drawers like that, and also I had never used this type of drawer side before. For the most part, it was a pretty straightforward process of measuring everything out, doing some math, and then cutting everything out to size. For this vanity, I'll be using undermount drawer slide from Rockler. I've always wanted to use drawer slides like that because they make for a very clean look since they can be seen from the side. However, I was intimidated by the fact that you need to take a lot into account dimensionally. For example, your drawer bottom has to be a specific distance from the frame, and you also need to add some holes and notches to accommodate for the drawer slides. All in all, it wasn't that complicated of a process. All you had to do is follow direction and make a couple measurements. After cutting all my parts to size, I decided that I was going to use the domino again to assemble this drawer. My idea was that with the amount of parts there were and the weird shape of the drawers, the dominoes were going to be the easiest option for me. I also had to cut corresponding notches in the drawer bottoms. After dry assembling my drawer and making sure that everything was square, it was time for a second dreaded glue up. And sometimes, you might have cut everything to the right size and assemble it perfectly, but there still might be a chance that your client is going to call you to tell you that some of the measurements have changed. Alright, I just ran into a bit of a problem, which is that this gap here is 4 inches and allowed for the pipe to go through. But in fact, that needs to be 12 inches for the second drawers because there are some knobs here for the hot and cold water. So I have a couple options here. I could rebuild the entire drawer and just recut all the parts. I have enough plywood to do that. I have some extra 1/4 inch plywood as well. But my idea was that since I'm wasting this part already and I'm not going to use it in other project. I mean, this is a 4-foot long drawer. I think I'm going to try to actually cut into it and just have to recut the internal parts here, but I can keep the bottom and the longer sides. Now, I thought about doing that on the table saw, but that seems a little bit sketchy. So I think I might do it on the band saw, and then we'll see how the cut quality is and what I need to do after that. So let's do that. It's too short. Track saw, table saw, track saw. Okay, I might have been a little bit dramatic because using the track saw with the clamps was really not sketchy for that cut. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I felt pretty sad destroying my perfectly good drawer, but in the long run, that would be for the best. In the meantime, I also assembled the two other drawers that I needed. For my Frankenstein drawer, I used pocket holes because, well, you're not going to see them and they were going to be way easier than adding new dominoes onto the structure. Okay, it seems like the drawer crisis was averted. I also took the time to clean up my other mistakes while I was at it. As I said before, I'm using those undermount drawer slides from Rockler, and they even come with all the hardware and very detailed instructions for me to install them. They're actually way simpler to install than I thought. All you need to do is add those little clips and then slide them onto the rails directly, and that's pretty much it. It's also always a good idea to use spacers like that to drill and mount your drawers so that you're sure that they are parallel with one another. After all the drawer slides were installed, it was time to cut my drawer faces to size. I'm also always amazed at the cut quality on this track saw. This is just breathtaking. Now obviously I want my drawer fronts to look like solid walnut, so I added some walnut edge banding to all the sides of the drawer fronts. I just iron on the bands and then cut them with a sharp chisel. A quick trick for the corners is to lay it flat and then press down with your chisel to have a perfectly clean cut. For the finish, I am using Rubio Monocoat Walnut. I think it gives a deeper, darker color to the walnut, which I really like. I applied it to both the drawer faces and the frame. Then it was time to test all the drawers and install the drawer fronts. It was really nice to see this piece come along, and I was very excited to put it all together finally. I used stacks of cards and clamps to hold everything in place before drilling holes and adding screws. That soft close is very satisfying. After that, it was rinse and repeat for the two other drawers, and it was way easier to do than if the cabinet had a back and a top. The final part of the project before delivery was to install this behemoth of a granite countertop onto the vanity. And look at that, I didn't even need a back brace. Now, because of the schedule of the remodel, this vanity won't be fully installed until early 2025. However, if you want to see the final result with the fancy brass hardware we picked, make sure to follow me on Instagram and stay tuned. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.